Bitcoin doesn't care who you are. Let that sit for a second. It doesn't care if you're a farmer in Nigeria or a hedge fund manager in Manhattan. It doesn't care if you have a PhD in economics or if you dropped out of high school. It doesn't care what passport you carry, what language you speak, or what your bank thinks of your credit score. And that one brutally simple fact might be the biggest reason Bitcoin is winning. Not the halvings, not the ETFs, not Larry Fink suddenly sounding like a Bitcoin maximalist on CNBC. Underneath all of that noise is something quieter, something almost philosophical. Bitcoin was built to be indifferent. And in a world obsessed with status, permission, and gatekeepers, indifference is a superpower. Today, I want to break down exactly why that matters. Not in theory, in real human terms. Because once you actually see this pattern, you can't unsee it. And it might change the way you think about money for the rest of your life. Let's get into it. Point 1. Bitcoin doesn't ask for your resume. Think about every financial system you've ever touched. To open a bank account, you need an ID, sometimes proof of address, sometimes a minimum deposit. In some countries, you need a local sponsor just to get a debit card. The traditional financial system was built like a private club, and private clubs have bouncers. Bitcoin has no bouncer. You don't apply to use Bitcoin. You don't get approved. There's no interview, no credit check, no committee deciding whether you're credit-worthy enough to hold value. You download a wallet, you generate a key, and that's it. You're in. Forever. There's a reason the unbanked population of the world, over 1 billion people who have never had access to a traditional bank account, are some of the fastest-growing user bases in crypto. In places like Nigeria, Argentina, Turkey, Vietnam, countries where currencies have collapsed, where inflation eats savings alive, where banks freeze accounts on a whim, Bitcoin isn't a speculative bet. It's a lifeline. Compare that to the traditional system, where a single account, a single business, a single person can be debanked overnight. No explanation, no appeal, just gone. Bitcoin doesn't do that. It can't. There's no CEO to call, no branch manager to plead with, because there's no one sitting at the top deciding who deserves access. The network doesn't know your name. It doesn't know your story. It just verifies the math. And that's exactly why it's spreading the way it is. Quietly, relentlessly, from the bottom up. Not because a government approved it, because people needed it. Point 2. It doesn't care about your politics, or anyone else's. Here's something wild. Bitcoin has lived through wars, elections, sanctions, impeachments, coups, interest rate hikes, currency collapses, Iran crises, and every single time, it just kept running. Remember when tensions in the Middle East spiked and markets panicked? Oil spiked, stocks dipped, gold did its usual nervous shuffle, and Bitcoin? Bitcoin didn't flinch the way people expected. Because Bitcoin isn't watching CNN. It's not reading geopolitical briefings. It's a protocol, a set of rules running on thousands of computers around the world, agnostic to who's in power and who isn't. This is the part people get wrong. They think Bitcoin is supposed to react like a stock, driven by earnings calls and political sentiment. But Bitcoin was never designed to please a government or flatter an ideology. It was designed to keep producing blocks every 10 minutes, whether the world is calm or on fire.
Governments change. Presidents change. Central bankers change their minds every single meeting. But the Bitcoin protocol has issued a new block roughly every 10 minutes for over 16 years, no matter who was screaming on television that week. That consistency is strange to us. We're used to systems that bend under pressure. Bitcoin doesn't bend, it just executes. And when the world gets scary, when trust in institutions gets shaky, people start asking a very simple question. What actually keeps working no matter what happens? For a growing number of people, the answer isn't a currency backed by a promise. It's a currency backed by code that doesn't care about the news cycle. Point 3.
It doesn't care if you're rich or broke. This one hits different. In the traditional system, wealth buys access. Rich people get private banking. They get better interest rates, better investment opportunities, access to hedge funds and pre-IPO shares that everyday people will never see. The system is layered, and the top layer is reserved for people who already have money. Bitcoin has one layer. A Satoshi, the smallest unit of Bitcoin, is available to anyone with an internet connection, whether you're putting in $5 or $5 million. The blockchain doesn't create a VIP section. There's no minimum balance to qualify for the real version of Bitcoin. You can literally buy a fraction of a coin on your lunch break with money you found in your coat pocket, and you're holding the exact same asset that a billionaire is holding.
This is why you'll hear people call Bitcoin the Great Equalizer. It sounds like a slogan, but there's actual structure behind it. The rules of the network, the 21 million coin cap, the transaction verification, the mining difficulty, apply identically to every single participant. No exceptions, no favors. Compare that to traditional markets, where insider access and connections can make or break your ability to invest early in something big. Bitcoin doesn't have an early access list. It had a starting line in 2009, and anyone could have walked up to it. Some people showed up early. Most people didn't believe it yet, but the door was never locked. It's still not locked. That's uncomfortable for people who are used to systems that protect the already powerful. Bitcoin doesn't protect anyone. It just runs.
Point 4. It doesn't care about borders. Try sending $10,000 from the US to the Philippines through a traditional bank wire. You'll deal with intermediary banks, processing fees, exchange rate markups, and a wait time that can stretch into days. Try sending it to a country under sanctions, and you might not be able to send it at all. Now, try sending Bitcoin. Doesn't matter if it's crossing one border or 12. Doesn't matter if it's going from a city to a village with no bank branch for 100 miles. The transaction settles on the blockchain, verified by a decentralized network of computers with no single country's permission required. This is why remittances, money that migrant workers send back home to their families, are one of the most quietly powerful use cases for crypto. Someone working abroad can send value home in minutes instead of days for a fraction of the fees that Western Union or traditional wire services charge. That's not a hypothetical. That's happening right now, every single day, in places most headlines never mention. Borders were built by governments to control movement of people, of goods, of information, and yes, of money. Bitcoin doesn't recognize any of those lines. To the network, a wallet address in Lagos looks exactly like a wallet address in London. Same math, same rules, same verification. That's not a political statement. It's just what happens when you build a system on cryptography instead of geography. Point 5. It doesn't care if you understand it too much. Here's the one that trips people up the most. You don't need to understand how Bitcoin mining works to hold Bitcoin. You don't need to know what a hash function is or how proof of work secures the network. The blockchain doesn't require a literacy test. This drives skeptics crazy. They'll say, most people who own Bitcoin can't even explain how it works. And they're right, but that's not a weakness. That's actually how almost every powerful technology spreads. Most people driving a car can't explain combustion engines. Most people using the internet can't explain how a data packet finds its way across the globe. Understanding the mechanism was never the requirement for benefiting from it. What Bitcoin asks of you isn't technical knowledge, it's trust in transparency. Anyone, anywhere can pull up the blockchain and verify every transaction that's ever happened in real time with no permission needed. You don't have to trust a person. You don't have to trust an institution's promise. You just have to trust math that anyone can check. That's a different kind of trust than we're used to. And it's exactly why, when trust in traditional institutions keeps eroding, when people watch banks freeze funds, watch currencies devalue, watch promises get broken, Bitcoin's version of trust starts looking a lot more appealing. Not because people fully understand the cryptography, because they understand the outcome. The rules don't change based on who's asking. So here's the pattern. Every single one of these points comes back to the same idea. Bitcoin doesn't discriminate. It doesn't reward connections. It doesn't punish outsiders. It doesn't bend for governments, and it doesn't bow to wealth. It treats a teenager in Manila exactly the same as it treats a billionaire in Zurich. That sounds almost too simple to be the reason something is winning. But think about how rare that actually is. Nearly every system humans have ever built, financial, political, social, has some form of hierarchy baked into it. Someone at the top deciding who gets access, who gets approved, who gets left out. Bitcoin was the first monetary network in human history that removed the gatekeeper entirely, not reduced it, removed it. And once people experience that, once someone in a country with a collapsing currency realizes they can protect their savings without needing a bank's permission, they don't go back to seeing money the old way. That's the quiet revolution happening underneath the headlines about ETFs and price charts. It's not really about price, it's about access. Price is just the symptom. Why this matters right now? We're living through a strange moment. Trust in traditional institutions is at some of its lowest levels in decades. People are watching inflation quietly erode their savings even when the news says the economy is fine. They're watching governments print money at scales that used to be unthinkable. They're watching banks make headlines for all the wrong reasons. In that environment, a system that doesn't care who you are starts to feel less like a gimmick and more like a necessity. This isn't about hype. It's not about some influencer telling you to ape into a coin because it's about to moon. It's about a structural shift in how value can move through the world. Permissionless, borderless, and indifferent to power. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens the way all quiet revolutions happen. Slowly, then all at once.
The takeaway? Bitcoin isn't winning because of clever marketing. It's not winning because of celebrity endorsements or because Wall Street finally decided it was cool. It's winning because it solved a problem that every human financial system before it created on purpose: the problem of exclusion. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care where you were born, what you earn, or who you know. It only cares about one thing. Can you verify the math? That's it. That's the whole test. And in a world that has spent centuries deciding who gets access to opportunity based on birthplace, connections, and wealth, a system that refuses to ask those questions isn't just different. It's dangerous to the old way of doing things. Dangerous in the best possible sense. So the next time someone tells you Bitcoin is just speculation, just a bubble, just a trend for people chasing quick gains, remember this. Speculation doesn't explain why people in collapsing economies are choosing it to protect their families. Speculation doesn't explain why migrant workers are using it to send money home faster and cheaper than ever before. What explains it is much simpler. Bitcoin doesn't care who you are. And for millions of people who have spent their entire lives being told they don't qualify, that indifference feels like freedom.
If this perspective shifted the way you think about Bitcoin even a little, that's exactly why this channel exists. We break down the psychology behind crypto, not just the charts, not just the hype, but the actual human reasons this technology is spreading the way it is. Subscribe if you want more of this. Turn on notifications if you don't want to miss the next one, and drop a comment. Tell me the moment you first realized Bitcoin doesn't care who you are. I read every single one. Until next time, stay curious, stay early, and remember, the network doesn't know your name. It just knows the truth.